Now, your closest challenger for the Republican nomination is a World Wrestling Entertainment executive. You lead her by 10 points, and no other contender tops 9%. What do you think is going to make you the Republican challenger for?
Well, my approach is to promote myself and to talk about my background and experience. I am the only Republican in the race who has military experience. I have extensive military experience, and I think that's important when we have troops in the field in Afghanistan and Iraq. I think it's important to have intelligence experience, which I have. I served in the CIA, and I was the first chairman of the Homeland Security Intelligence Committee. We've just had an incident at Fort Hood, Texas, where a military officer essentially self-recruited and murdered a bunch of soldiers, a sort of a personal jihad. That is not a situation that we haven't seen before. We've seen that in Great Britain. We've seen that in Canada. So I think somebody with my background is better able to deal with those kind of issues. I am the only candidate who's served in the Congress. I've served for 6 years as a member of the House of Representatives, and I'm the only candidate who's served in the Senate in any capacity. I was a Senate staffer working for Senator Goldwater for 4 years as his chief of staff. So I think that when you look back at my career of public service and you look at my experience, I offer an awful lot, not just to the Republican Party, but to the state of Connecticut. I'm a guy that can hit the ground running and be effective the very first day I'm there.
And I think that's very important. I was only 12 years old, but I remember 40 years ago when Senator Thomas Dodd, our current senator's father, failed to obtain the Democratic nomination after being censored for unethical behavior by the U.S. Senate. We now have Chris Dodd, as you said, getting preferential mortgages, receiving substantial contributions from the financial institutions he's responsible for drafting legislation over, and moving to Iowa when he should be serving the people of Connecticut and Washington. As you look at that pattern of behavior, what do you think it says?
Well, I don't want to pass any judgment on Senator Tom Dodd. My recollection is that he had a distinguished career as an FBI officer. He also was a Nuremberg prosecutor, very effective at that. What happened to him was sad. It was a sad situation, and I think that in some respects his son went to the Senate with the idea that he would somehow recoup the family name, I guess is a way of putting it. And that was a very exciting thing to consider. Somewhere along the way, I think he's lost his way. Maybe it's because he doesn't really live in Connecticut anymore. He lives in Washington, D.C. He's been in the Senate a long time. I have found in my own career, when I was in the State House of Representatives for 10 years, I decided that's enough. I essentially limited myself to 5 terms and then ran for the Congress. Of course, the people didn't send me back for my 4th term. I lost by 83 votes. But in the interim, I served as business advocate for the state of Connecticut. It's been a great opportunity to get back in touch with the people of the state of Connecticut. And sometimes elected officials lose touch. And I think in some respects, Senator Dodd has lost touch. He's out of touch with the people he represents, and it's time for a change.
I know that ABC 2 weeks ago talked about a GAO poll report, and basically it explained that 1 in 10 of the jobs that the White House claims were created or saved through the stimulus package, in fact, are from projects that have received no stimulus money. Even Senator Dodd acknowledged that that this project, the stimulus money, wasn't targeted as it should be. You've called for the return of this money to the U.S. taxpayer through either deficit reduction or tax cuts. Do you have any preference which way we would go? And if so, tell us why.
I've called for a return of the remaining funds for deficit reduction first and foremost, because we have created an incredible amount of debt in a very short period of time, literally 9 months. Our deficit's gone from about $400 billion to $1.4 trillion, which is a huge increase. And we have liabilities in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and other government accounts that are just growing at a dramatic rate. I listened to Steve Moore the other day, who is an economist and a commentator for the Wall Street Journal, and he made the point that the current stimulus dollars, if you include the TARP, the stimulus package, and all of the others, amounts to a little over $2 trillion. And that for $2 trillion, we could have given every taxpayer and every corporate entity tax relief for 1 year. And what would have really stimulated the economy? Taking money and passing it around, pork barrel projects and earmarks, or giving everybody a tax break? I believe that the tax break proposal would have worked better to stimulate the economy, because it would have allowed citizens and small businesses to spend the money as they saw fit to cover the costs of their family and to cover the costs of their business. Now, back in 2003, during the recession that came after 9/11, we passed legislation that gave every small business in America a tax credit up to $100,000 to expense new equipment purchases. Mm-hmm. That allowed that small businessman and woman to buy new equipment to improve productivity, but it also replenished the supply chain and created demand for goods, which were then sold and serviced, and that brought us out of that recession. That's how you do it. You don't take money from the private sector and channel it through the public sector and give it to the state or to the municipalities. That's not a stimulus of small business or the business community. That doesn't stimulate the economy. That stimulates the government. And we don't need more government. We need less government. So I would call for the administration and for the Congress to stop this crazy spending and to target tax cuts to reinvigorate, especially small business here in the United States.
Last week you called on Secretary of the Treasury Timothy Geithner to resign. You want to elaborate on some of those issues for people?
Well, Secretary Geithner was presented to us as the smartest guy in the world, and even though he apparently wasn't smart enough to pay his taxes, and this was because he did such a great job up at the Federal Reserve in New York. Well, lo and behold, the Inspector General has looked at the job he did up in New York, and it's not as good as it originally appeared. Now, first and foremost, when the federal government bailed out AIG and gave them literally billions of dollars, they used some of that money to repay creditors in foreign countries and foreign banks. That's our taxpayer dollars going to foreign banks and foreign countries, and I don't think the taxpayers really knew that. And secondly, our taxpayer dollars are going to pay million-dollar bonuses out of our pocket at a time when Connecticut residents are confronted with unemployment over 9%, and the promise was we'd keep it at 8%, and they're being confronted with tax payments to the federal government, to AIG, for bonuses at a time when 40,000 families are confronted with foreclosure. So this really is not right. And I'm not the only one that has called for his resignation. Peter DeFazio from Oregon, a Democrat, has done the same. So this is a bipartisan initiative. The stimulus package has not worked. The bailout of AIG was a bad decision. U.S. taxpayer dollars are going to bonuses in foreign banks. And I say enough already. It's time for a change.